at the UN. Part of his, the source of his inspiration was the door of no return. And the name actually of the permanent memorial is the Ark of Return, and the idea is that from the door of no return, thanks to the commemoration and now we able to go back to where it was the opposite, and the permanent memorial allows this through the remembering to be able to heal from the past and to better embrace the future. I was just curious of your impression about meeting with him. He explained you how he built the and conceived the memorial. What do you have anything you want to share with us on that?
So memorialization is another step in the process of reconciliation. It is necessary to build memorials of as a place of remembrance, and the link between the door of no return and the ark of return. So is really the new step. Sometimes people talk about reparation. But the first step of the reparation is to consider what's happened between 16th until 19th as a part of the history of human beings. Not only the history of white people, or only the history of black people, it's just the history of human beings. And having this kind of exhibit, having this kind of memorial is something necessary. You know that the perpetrators use the entire entity of Africa, everywhere in Africa. So that's why the storytelling in Gorée Island is exactly the same in Ouida. It's exactly the same also in Elmina in Ghana. So it's the same also in South Africa. So it is very necessary to replicate this kind of memorial everywhere in the world, just to remind the fragility of the liberties.
My name is Kennedy. I'm from the 32nd floor. This is clearly an important discussion, especially for people of color trying to know where they came from and how slavery impacted them. I'm always surprised, or rather disappointed, after such a colorful discussion on how many slaves were taken away and why they were taken away, and in most cases were beast of burden for the merchants, or they were laborers, forced laborers to make money for the slave owners. But then there's this addition that says that Africans themselves contributed to slave trade. Africans themselves sold these people, they owned slaves. But there's never an explanation in Ghana, in Senegal, on how black people, Africans, use these slaves. Because you go to Africa, you don't see these fortified castles built by the black people for the black people. All we see all around Africa are built by the Portuguese, the French, who are benefiting from this trade, not the Africans themselves. So my question to the gentleman with the film, I haven't seen a film, how are the Africans always say that they were complicit, they owned slaves? How do they utilize these slaves? Because we know the story of the true slave owners in the new America, the new land, and even in Europe and in Asia, in the Arab countries. We know how the slaves were utilized. But then African continent, on the continent of Africa, that story is never clear. So maybe you want to shed some light on that.
I mean, actually, it's not my film, but a film by yeah. So I don't know. I don't have a clear idea of how the slaves were were used on the continent, but I do know that the slavery did exist in Africa, and I think we still have examples in countries like Mauritania. But the film itself has, let's say, puts out something new, as I said, that people don't usually see, which is the implication of African people themselves. And I think let's say, the merit of this film is to have the courage to show this aspect of, the slave trade in Africa. And to end, I would like to, put a question to Mr. Kuli. He ended his presentation by the fact that we should forgive but not forget. And I remember that, if I'm not mistaken, that one Pope, Pope John II, I think, paid a visit to the Gorée Islands, and I don't know if you were there at that time.
Yeah.
So, and he asked for forgiveness to all those who suffered from this slave trade. So, can you share with us your thoughts about this action of it?
So, is another step of reparation. So, to recognize the part played by everyone in the slave trade, Africans and Europeans. So it was for the first time that the Pope was apologized to the African people. And in the meantime, he said that what's happened is not in the responsibility of the Christians. But also, I would like to add that it was not in the responsibility of Muslims. Islam and Christians don't accept and didn't accept slavery and the slave trade, and slavery particularly. So it's just for profit of the human being. Is not a question of Christian and Muslim. That is something very, 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 very strong that I would like to mention. And also, the role played by Africans during the slave trade is not today. It is quite impossible to see the consequences today in Africa. If you go to Bordeaux, if you go to Nantes, so you can see evidences. But in Africa, nothing in Africa. So something is wrong. Now, how to consider that we know that Africans take a great place during the slave trade. But the slave trade was organized by the Europeans, not by Africans. It's something which need to be clarified. So that's why the role of UNESCO, the role of the UN is very important.
Anyone else?
I was just, because you receive so many children and children that you inform about slavery. I myself have an 8-year-old son, and I tried to explain what happened during this time, and he is completely flabbergasted. He just cannot understand how something like this could ever have happened in his reality. So I'm wondering, especially when you teach young children, when you welcome young children, sort of what is the message you give them, or what do you think is the best message to give to a young audience to understand and to also take something for their current lives with them?
So the goal is to link what's happened during the period of slavery and the slave trade with what happened today. I'm talking about the new implications, the new form of slavery, which confront the discriminations. Discriminations because of skin color. Discrimination because of the gender. Discrimination because of poverty. And other form of discrimination. So what we do is to try to make the link, and we use simple examples around the life of day to day. That is important for the kids, not to stay in the period of slavery and the slave trade, but to have an excellent view, a new vision, and to know exactly how they can use this history today. It's really the goal. Not to separate again white people and blacks, Arabs and Africans, and no, it's not the goal of this process.
You mentioned Brazil. Brazil, indeed, on Friday, we had a presentation by the ambassador of Brazil, Ambassador de Aguiar Patriota, who was the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brazil. And he told us that out of 200 million people living in Brazil, half of the population, 100 million, is of African descent. There is an awareness, obviously, in Brazil of the issue. There is a huge museum in São Paulo, which is actually dedicated to the legacy of what the people of African descent have brought to the Brazilian culture. And this is going to be one of the things that will be celebrated starting in 2015. I don't know if you are aware, but the General Assembly has declared the decade starting on 1 January 2015, the decade of people of African descent, which is going to recognize the contribution that people of African descent have made all over the world in the societies they live in. So I think it's also in that context that we will have the UN and the member states are going to invite people around the world, whether they are governments or civil society or all of the stakeholders, to really recognize that contribution and celebrate that contribution. So we look for, actually it's OHCHR, I think, that is going to be in the lead for the decade, but I think UNESCO and all of the partners are going to be working on this. There will be a program of activity that will be determined, and we are going to see the kickoff very soon. Any other questions, comments? I'm turning to our representatives from the Mission of Senegal. Would you like to say anything?
Just maybe to thank you for organizing this meeting. I think my name is Mr. Sila, the leader of Senegal. We really appreciate this occasion for us to discuss with Mr. Koli. I think all of us, I'm not telling just about maybe people from New York. If I say us, I think I'm talking about all the Senegalese people. Sometimes we lack of information about Gore Island history. Really, I can tell you some stories of Senegalese people who don't really know about the history of slavery, not only in Senegal but in Africa. And I think that we are making maybe what someone else is calling the cultural diplomacy. And Mr. Elwa is, we appreciate his presence here because it's not easy to have Mr. Elwa for in this kind of event. He's very busy in Senegal and all around the world. And we were trying to organize his presence here in New York with the PPR and other partners concerning the memorial project. And we hope that all the engagement you take here with EPI and other partners can be successfully implemented here in New York, in Senegal, or in Paris. And I think that if we work very closely between the Senegalese mission and Mr. Elwa and you, I think that we can have, how can I say that, success about what we are here for today. And we are here today to remember about the slavery. It's a very, very important topic for Africa. And I appreciate this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We are honored to have you with us. I would like to maybe ask Mr. Colli if he has any last words.
Just to say that, again, that I'm very, very, very interested and would like to thank all of you to give me the opportunity to share my small knowledge about this topic.
I believe you are too modest. Thank you so much.